Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. How did a Toronto landscaper become one of Canada's most notorious serial killers and go undetected for years? This chilling question points to the disturbing case of Bruce McArthur, a man who appeared to live an ordinary life while committing a series of horrific crimes. Between 2010 and 2017, McArthur targeted men connected to Toronto's gay village, many of whom were immigrants or from marginalized communities. He lured his victims with charm and familiarity, then murdered them and concealed their remains in planters on properties where he worked. Bruce McArthur's case exposed serious flaws in the way police handled missing persons reports, especially when those reports involved marginalized individuals. Despite community concerns and patterns in the disappearances, authorities failed to connect the dots for years. The case sparked public outrage, not only because of the brutality of the crimes, but because of how long it took to stop them, raising painful questions about whose lives are prioritized in the justice system. This topic includes sensitive and disturbing material, including violence and issues related to systemic neglect. Listener discretion is advised. Bruce McArthur was born in 1951 and raised on a farm in Lindsay, Ontario. His early life appeared fairly typical. He grew up in a conservative, religious household, and later married a woman with whom he had 2 children. For much of his early adulthood, McArthur lived what seemed like an ordinary suburban life, working in retail and managing family responsibilities. But beneath the surface, he struggled with his sexual identity in a time and place where coming out as gay carried significant stigma. In the late 1990s, McArthur moved to Toronto, eventually settling into the city's LGBTQ+ community. By then, he had come out as gay and was living as a single man. Began building a new life for himself, starting a landscaping business that catered to clients across the city. Known by many as friendly and reliable, McArthur developed a reputation as a helpful handyman and often socialized with members of the Church Wellesley Village, Toronto's historic gay neighborhood. But while McArthur maintained this image of a quiet, hardworking man, he was hiding a much darker truth. Behind closed doors, he led a double life, cultivating online personas and relationships that he used to lure vulnerable men. His charm and perceived harmlessness allowed him to avoid suspicion, even as people around him began to disappear. This hidden persona would later become central to understanding how he evaded justice for so long. Between 2010 and 2017, 8 men went missing from Toronto, men whose disappearances were deeply alarming to their families and communities, but who, for far too long, did not receive the attention they deserved. These men were later identified as the victims of Bruce McArthur. Their names are Skandaraj Navarat, Nab, Abdulbasir, Faizi, Majid Kayan, Dean Lisawick, Selamizan, Andrew Kinsman, Kirashna, Kumar, Kanagaratnam, and Sarushma Modi. Each of them had a unique story, and each loss left a painful void that rippled through the people who knew and loved them. Skandaraj Navaratnam was a Tamil refugee from Sri Lanka who fled civil war to seek a better life in Canada. He was known for his warm personality and deep involvement in Toronto's LGBTQ+ community. He vanished in 2010, and his friends raised the alarm quickly, but no meaningful leads followed. Abdulbasir, Faizi, an immigrant from Afghanistan, was married with children and living a double life. He visited the gay village in secret, fearful of being outed. He disappeared just months after Navaratnam, under similarly mysterious circumstances. Majid Kayan, another immigrant from Afghanistan, went missing in 2012. Like Faizi, he was a closeted gay man from a conservative background. His case did prompt a police investigation project Houston, but it was eventually closed without resolution. Dean Liswick was different from the others in that he never had a formal missing persons report filed. He was homeless and often stayed in shelters, making him especially vulnerable. Despite his unstable situation, those who knew him described him as kind-hearted and eager to help others. His death likely occurred around 2015. Salim Izan, a Turkish man and recent immigrant, was reported missing in 2017. Soft-spoken and spiritual, Izan was known for his gentle nature, his disappearance finally triggered a renewed sense of urgency in the community. Andrew Kinsman, a well-known activist and longtime resident of the gay village, and also went missing in 2017. Unlike earlier cases, his disappearance immediately set off alarms. He had a stable life, close friends, and left behind clues most, notably a calendar entry with the name Bruce on the day he vanished. This ultimately became a critical lead for investigators. Kirushna Kumar Kanagaratnam, another Tamil refugee, was never reported missing in Canada. He was under threat of deportation and living off the grid, afraid of being found by authorities. This made him an easy target and tragically invisible in the eyes of the system. Sarosh Mahmoodi, an Iranian man, went missing in 2015. He was married and living in Toronto's suburbs. Like several of the others, he had connections to the gay village, though few details of his personal life were made public at the time. These men shared more than just a tragic end. Many were racialized immigrants or members of marginalized communities. Several lived double lives due to fear of rejection or cultural stigma. Their disappearances, though noticed by friends and family, did not receive consistent or urgent attention from police. Some weren't investigated properly. Others weren't reported missing at all. The patterns were there, but they were overlooked, raising serious questions about bias, systemic neglect, and who society chooses to protect. The investigation into the disappearances of Bruce McArthur's victims unfolded over nearly a decade and was marked by critical delays, missed opportunities, and deepening community mistrust. From the first missing persons reports in 2010 to McArthur's arrest, in 2018 police efforts were fragmented and at times inadequate. These failings would become a central focus of public outrage. When Skandaraj Navaratnam, Abdul Basir, Faizi, and Majid Kayan vanished between 2010 and 2012. Their disappearances raised immediate concern within Toronto's LGBTQ community. All three men had ties to the Church Wellesley village, and the similarities in their backgrounds and circumstances seemed too strong to be coincidence. In 2012, the Toronto police launched Project Houston to investigate the possibility that a serial killer might be targeting gay men. The team reviewed the cases and even interviewed Bruce McArthur in 2013, but no charges were laid. He was not considered a serious suspect. Ultimately, Project Houston was closed in 2014 without any clear resolution, and the investigation faded from the spotlight. As time passed, more men vanished. Yet for years, their cases were handled in isolation, with no central coordination. Many community members felt police were not taking the disappearances seriously, since most of the missing were people of color, immigrants, or individuals living on the margins. The LGBTQ community, particularly in the gay village, began organizing marches and demanding answers. Their growing frustration highlighted long-standing tensions between the community and law enforcement. The turning point came in 2017 with the disappearance of Andrew Kinsman. Unlike some earlier victims, Kinsman was well-known, politically active, and deeply rooted in the community. His sudden absence was impossible to ignore. Friends quickly organized search efforts, distributed posters, and pushed for answers. Crucially, investigators found a note in Kinsman's calendar with the name Bruce written on the day he disappeared. This small but vital clue refocused police attention. In response, the Toronto Police launched Project Prism in 2017, a new task force specifically dedicated to the recent disappearances. This time, the investigation took a more aggressive approach. Police used surveillance, digital forensics, and data analysis to track movements and online communications. They identified Bruce McArthur as someone who had interacted with several of the missing men, including Kinsman. Through court-authorized surveillance, officers observed McArthur's activities and monitored his devices. They eventually found photos on his computer of some of the victims' images taken after their deaths. This discovery, combined with mounting evidence, gave police the grounds they needed to act. On January 18, 2018, police arrested Bruce McArthur at his apartment. They found a man tied up, but alive inside, potentially his next victim. That same day, officers began searching the properties where McArthur had worked as a landscaper. It was thorough. In the months following Bruce McArthur's arrest, investigators built a solid case against him. He was ultimately charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder, 1 for each of the men whose remains were recovered. The evidence was overwhelming. Photographs, digital records, and physical remains all tied him to the crimes beyond any doubt. Rather than go to trial, McArthur entered a guilty plea in January 2019. He admitted to murdering all 8 men between 2010 and 2017, sparing the victims' families the trauma of a lengthy and graphic trial. His plea confirmed the horrifying reality that these murders had been carefully planned, carried out in secret and hidden in plain sight for nearly a decade. The court sentenced McArthur to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. Harshest penalty available under Canadian law. Given that he was 67 at the time, the sentence ensures he will die behind bars. The judge described his crimes as pure evil, emphasizing the calculated nature of the murders and the devastating impact on the victims' families and communities. For the families, the sentencing brought mixed emotions. Some expressed relief that justice had been served and that they finally had answers. Others voiced frustration that it had taken so long to catch McArthur and worried that LGBTQ+ groups reacted with sorrow and outrage. Many saw the case as a tragic reflection of how society and law enforcement too often neglects marginalized people. They called for reforms in how missing persons cases are handled, especially for queer, racialized, and vulnerable individuals. Public officials offered condolences and vowed to learn from the failures exposed by the investigation. But for many, the trial and sentencing were only part of a larger reckoning, one that extended far beyond the courtroom and into the heart of how justice is delivered, to whom. The aftermath of Bruce McArthur's crimes left a deep and lasting impact on Toronto and beyond, sparking urgent conversations about police accountability, systemic bias, and how marginalized communities are treated by institutions meant to protect them. In the wake of the investigation, public pressure mounted. For transparency and reform, the Toronto police faced intense scrutiny for their handling of the case. Critics pointed to years of missed warnings, ignored patterns, and a lack of urgency when racialized or vulnerable individuals went missing. In response, the force launched internal reviews, and an independent investigation was ordered to examine how the missing persons cases had been managed. The resulting report, released in 2021, concluded that systemic failings, including bias and poor communication, had hampered the investigation. It made dozens of recommendations aimed at improving how police handle missing persons cases, especially those involving LGBTQ+ individuals and marginalized communities. The case further strained the relationship between Toronto's LGBTQ+ community and law enforcement. Many felt betrayed, unheard, and dismissed during the years when community members were raising alarms about the disappearances. In the aftermath, police made efforts to rebuild trust through community outreach, liaison programs, and increased transparency. However, for many, the damage was already done. The case became a symbol of how institutions often fail those who live at the intersections of race, sexuality, immigration status, and poverty. Amid the grief, communities rallied to honor the victims. Memorials were held across the city, particularly in the Church Wellesley Village, where vigils and art installations paid tribute to the men who lost their lives. Advocacy groups pushed for systemic change, calling for better protections for LGBTQ+ individuals, reforms in policing, and greater support for missing persons investigations. The legacy of the case has fueled ongoing activism, not just in Toronto, but across Canada. Media played a major role in amplifying the story. Numerous documentaries, podcasts, and books explored the case in depth, analyzing how McArthur operated undetected and how societal failings contributed to the tragedy. These include CBC's The Village podcast and books like The Toronto Serial Killer by Justin Ling, which dig into the broader cultural and institutional issues exposed by the case. Ultimately, the McArthur case left behind more than just a series of unanswered questions. It served as a painful lesson in what happens when vulnerable lives are overlooked, and a call to ensure such neglect is never repeated. Even after Bruce McArthur's conviction, troubling questions remain questions that continue to haunt investigators, communities, and the public. One of the most pressing is whether there were more victims. McArthur's crimes spanned nearly a decade, but his access to vulnerable people, his online activity, and the gaps in police monitoring raised the possibility that not all victims have been identified. Despite exhaustive investigations, no additional charges have been laid, but police have acknowledged that they cannot be certain the full extent of his crimes is known. The case also highlighted missed opportunities that, if handled differently, might have saved lives. McArthur was questioned by police in 2013 after an assault complaint from a man who had escaped one of his violent encounters. Instead of laying charges, police let him go and closed the case. He was also interviewed during Project Houston, yet he wasn't seen as a serious suspect. These missed chances to intervene allowed him to continue killing for years. Underlying all of this is the issue of systemic bias. Most of McArthur's victims were men of color, immigrants, or people living on the margins, some undocumented, some without strong family ties in Canada. Their disappearances weren't prioritized in the same way as others might have been. The police's slow response, combined with community concerns being dismissed, pointed to deeper issues around how race, sexuality, immigration status, and class affect access to justice. These failures have fueled an ongoing conversation about law enforcement's relationship with LGBTQ+ communities, particularly those of color. Critics argue that bias, both conscious and unconscious, led to fatal delays in connecting the disappearances and treating them as serious threats. The McArthur case is now a reference point in broader discussions about police reform, equity, and the need for culturally competent, community-centered approaches to public safety. While Bruce McArthur is behind bars, the consequences of his actions and the system's failure to stop him sooner continue to be felt. The case leaves a legacy not only of grief, but of a call to confront uncomfortable truths about whose lives are protected, whose voices are heard, and what needs to change to ensure justice is truly equal.